I think the success of the market economy, to the extent it has been successful, and it has been always dependent on support from the state. It's not a model of capitalism. If you take an author like Adam Smith, he not only never uses the term capitalism, never, but he also discusses the complementary role of the state and the market, that the state is needed to regulate the market. He discusses how excessive risk-taking by investors, very like the ones who generated the 2008 crisis, but he was discussing in 1776 in the context of the South Sea bubble. And he described them as prodigals and projectors who can make the economy very unstable and move away investment from productive fields into speculative financial fields. You see, I always take the view that there isn't one problem that's haunting the world. There are many problems. And the ones who identify all of them problematic. And to ask which one is the main problem is, I think, quite a hopeless exercise. It's like saying which is the main meal, lunch or dinner. I think it's generally a good idea to have both, if you can afford it. But there's also not famine, but very large amount of non-extreme hunger, as you see in India. No famine at all. Since the British left, no famine. But the non-extreme hunger is still very large in India. And that's the problem too. It makes people's health more vulnerable. It prevents the brain development of children. It affects society. There are many problems. Similarly, the lack of health care available to people who cannot afford it. It's a problem in many countries, including in the United States. I think that's a very, very good question, like the previous two, which were also very good questions. I think I don't know what right in Brazil means. When I hear that my friend Cardozo is regarded as a right-wing thinker, in America he will be regarded as an extreme left-wing thinker. So I'm not quite sure what the right-left distinction is. I think Latin America, when I became first aware of it, I didn't come to Brazil, I did go to Mexico, I did go to Colombia. The beginning of my own interest and work in economics in the 60s had two different problems. One was a skepticism of the market economy and a belief that there may be some danger in globalization. And that was particularly pursued even in ECLA, the Economic Commission for Latin America, which were very protectionist in their approach. The other problem was the absence of enough constructive thinking about how the state can do a lot of great things which the market would never be able to do. The discussion was very much more negative, both about the market, don't give it too much room, and about the state, more how to restrict the market rather than how to construct the basis of good living. Celso Furtado, and I often talked about this problem. He was not in spirit of the Latin American approach, including that of Spanish, but he was also, like most Latin American economies, quite reluctant to go against that general consensus. So what happened in Brazil, I think, as I understand it, is that the pro-market approach won first, and Brazil became an economy with high growth rate. but very low human development. And then over the last 20 years, it had remedied the second defect law. And indeed, the state has become much more active, including providing healthcare, education for all, even the basic income for people with low income level. So I think in many ways that conversation which you're asking for has taken place and is taking place, and that I welcome. I can tell you that I'm writing at the moment with my colleague, with my friend, Ron Dredd, another book on India, where Brazil is very much an example we draw on as constructive change. It's very much based on the conversations that come together. In the 1940s came the welfare state, came the National Health Service, came widespread unemployment insurance in the country where the world didn't have in the 1930s, came much more sensible state-based pension. And this applied not only to Europe and to some extent America, excepting healthcare. It applied to Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, very strongly, much before. Communist China. Taiwan was committed to having healthcare for all, covered by the state. And South Korea, and so on. So I think these economies were often thought to be great capitalist economies, but they had an active market and an active state. That's the main lesson of the 20th century. And if you, the second half of the 20th century, and if you think about the healthcare, basically it translates, I'm not commenting on Brazil particularly because I don't know now, that a basic healthcare has to be provided by the state. There's no option. I don't know any case where it works well, that private care covers everyone. And there are good economic reasons for it, like asymmetry of information, on which many economists have written, including Kenneth Arrow. But then you might allow, like in Canada, private medical practice, because you can't stop the rich from taking care of their body. If you leave them free to buy yachts and luxury trips and say, no, you can't spend on medical expenditure. So it has to be a dual system. Coverage for all to the state and allowing freedom for people to go beyond, unless you want to take everything from like yachts, big buildings, big cars, you're not going to do it. Now the question about Brazil and India, about being poor countries, certainly very poor countries, but they're not similarly poor. Brazil has been about 7 or 8 times richer in terms of per capita income than India. And it's still a lot richer than China, despite China's economic growth. On the other hand, relatively speaking, it's poor in the world scale. Brazil has did very little on human development, even in 1989, when with the same co-author, where I published a book on hunger and public action, Brazil's performance was very low in human development. Today's performance is very high. So there has been a change in that. And I'm arguing that these changes can be carried further, one. And second, whatever changes have happened already, there are lessons for countries like India in it. That's the basic income approach. And there are a lot of people argue for it historically. And in the contemporary world, among the leaders on that is Philippe Valparis in Belgium, and Eduardo Suplicy, I can't say here. And certainly, in terms of removing poverty, it has a great advantage of speed, of getting income to people straight away, and then they can spend it as they like. And so there's merit in that. I have never been an active basic income champion because I see the value of it, and I support Suplicy and Philippe Valparis. But state also had other commitments about healthcare, about education. And so it's a question of balancing that. My own view is that the basic supplementary income has a limited but very important role. I'm not against it, but you can't solve the problem of poverty just with that. You need state delivery of education and healthcare. Again, like in healthcare, in education too, I wouldn't be against private schools going beyond that. But basic education has to come at a very high level in Brazil. Now, Brazil's level is a lot higher than mine in our country, in India. But it can still go further than that. It's a question of balancing. So I would put it entirely on a question of balance. It's in competition with other demands of money. Seeing a famine, which I did in 1943, did influence me and made me think someday I would study it. I didn't study it until much later, but I was present in Bengal, which had the last famine in India, 3 years before British Empire ended, and I could see what went wrong and how it could be prevented. And later also why the disappearance of the empire also led to the disappearance of the famine. So our interests come from many sources. Seeing things around me is one, but there are other sources too, because human mind is quite, yours, mine, everybody's here. It's much broader than just immediate experience. Again, are the causes of misery, all kinds of things. The traditional cause of misery, of course, was technological underdevelopment. When Hobbes, in the 17th century, talked about human life being nasty, brutish, and so on, it was not possible to make life longer and rich and comfortable and secure in those days without what happened with the Industrial Revolution. So you need technology, you need a flourishing market economy, but the market favors those who have some capital. A lot of people have no capital, they can't enter it. So one cause of misery is lack of capital that you have. That's something which Karl Marx discussed a lot. Then there are problems that even when the market economy is flourishing, it may be very difficult to deliver health care and education for all without the state doing it. So you need the role of the state, and the absence of the role of the state is another problem. So that's a subject of a huge book, and in fact my book, Development of Freedom, is mostly concerned with just that problem. It is available in Portuguese by translators by Compania. So thank you very much for all of you coming, and I'm very grateful. Thank you.